Sup, humanoids? Sup, humanoids? Sup, humanoids? It's E-Man. I'm just like you. I'm just like you. I'm just like you. Oh! Mann? Eh? Just go out there and live your damn life! Woo! Just live your damn life! It's fine, just go out there and live your damn life!
Hello?
Demon, you're dead.
Open Stage would like to acknowledge the Susquehannock peoples, upon whose unceded land we produce this show. Open Stage commits to the work of dismantling the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and the exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples that continue today. At Open Stage, we also believe that Black Lives Matter, and you should too. That belief starts with acknowledging plainly how the systems we depend on often operate as if they don't. We at Open Stage proudly stand united with Black people and communities of color during this movement of unrest and uprising. This show is brought to you by Open Stage, a professional theater company. Check out Open Stage's complete list of shows, all of which are offered completely free this season at openstagehbg.com. Thank you and enjoy the show.
This feels good. Come up to the fire, ladies.
I'm not cold.
Mr. Hale, before we move things about, you explain everything to Mr. Henderson just the way you saw it when you came in here yesterday morning.
By the way, has anything been moved? Are things just as you left them yesterday?
It's just the same. When it dropped below zero last night, I thought I'd better send Frank out this morning to make a fire. No use for us getting pneumonia with a big case on. But I told him to not touch anything else except the stove. Well, you know, Frank.
Somebody should have been left here yesterday.
Oh. Yesterday, when I had to send Frank to Moore Center for that man who went crazy, I want you to know I had my hands full yesterday. I knew you could get back from Omaha by today, and as long as I went over everything myself, I figured...
Mr. Hale, tell just what happened when you came here yesterday morning.
Well, Harry and I started to town with a load of potatoes. We come along the road from my place, and as I got here, I said, I'm going to see if I can get John Wright to go in with me on a party telephone. I had spoken to Wright about it once before, and he put me off, saying folks talk too much anyway, and all he asked for was peace and quiet. Well, I guess you know about how much he talked himself, but I thought maybe if I went to the house and talked about it before his wife, though I said to Harry that I didn't know as what his wife wanted made much difference to John.
Let's talk about that later, Mr. Hale. I do want to talk about that, but tell now what just happened when you got to the house.
Well, I didn't hear or see anything. I knocked at the door, and still it was all quiet inside. I knew they must have been up. It was past 8 o'clock. So I knocked again, and I thought I heard somebody say, "Come in." I wasn't sure. I'm not sure yet, but I opened the door.
What was she doing?
Well, she was rocking back and forth, and she had her apron in her hands and was kind of pleating at it.
And how did she look?
Well, she looked queer.
How do you mean queer?
Well, as if she didn't know what she was going to do next, and kind of done up.
How did she seem to think about your coming?
Well, I don't think she minded one way or t'other. She didn't pay much attention. I said, "How do, Mrs. Wright? It's cold, ain't it?" And she said, "Is it?" And went on pleating at her apron. Well, I was surprised that she didn't ask me to come up to the stove or to sit down, but just sat there, not even looking at me. So I said, "I want to see John." And then she laughed. I guess you would call it a laugh. I thought of Harry and the team outside, so I said a little sharp, "Can I see John?" "No," says she, kind of dull like. "Well, ain't he home?" says I. "Yes," says she, "he's home." "Then why can't I see him?" I asked her, out of patience. "'Cause he's dead," says she. "Dead?" says I. She nodded her head, not getting a bit excited, but rocking back and forth. "Well, where is he?" says I, not knowing what else to say. She just pointed upstairs like that. I got up with the idea of going up there. I says, "Why, what did he die of?" "He died of a rope round his neck," says she, and just went on a-pleating at her apron. Well, I went out and I called Harry. I thought I might need help. We went upstairs, and he was lying there.
I think I'd rather have you go into that upstairs where you can point it all out. Just go on now with the rest of your story.
Well, my first thought was to get that rope off. It looked awful, but Harry, he went up to him and he said, No, he's dead all right, and we better not touch anything. So we went back downstairs, and she was still sitting there that same way. Has anybody been notified? I asked. No, says she, unconcerned. Who did this, Mrs. Wright? Said Harry. He said it businesslike. And she stopped pleating of her apron. I don't know, she says. You don't know, says Harry. No, says she. Well, weren't you sleeping in the bed with him, says Harry. Yes, says she, but I was on the inside. Somebody slipped a rope around his neck and strangled him, and you didn't wake up, says Harry. I didn't wake up, she said after him. Well, we must have looked as if we didn't see how that could be, for after a minute she says, I sleep sound. Well, Harry was going to ask her some more questions, but I said maybe we ought to let her tell her story first to the coroner or to the sheriff. So Harry went as fast as he could to River's place, where there's a telephone.
And what did Mrs. Wright do when she knew that you had gone for the coroner?
Well, she moved from that chair to this one over here and just sat there with her hands together and looking down. Well, I got the feeling that I ought to make some conversation. So I said I had come in to see if John wanted to put in a telephone. And at that, she started to laugh. And then she stopped and looked at me, scared. I don't know, maybe it was scared. I wouldn't like to say it was. Well, soon Harry got back, and then Dr. Lloyd came, and you, Mr. Peters, and so I guess that's all I know that you don't.
I guess we'll go upstairs first, and then to the barn and around. You're convinced that there was nothing important here, nothing that would point to any motive?
Nothing here but kitchen things.
Here's a nice mess.
Oh, her fruit. It did freeze. She worried about that when it turned so cold. She said the fire'd go out and her jars would break.
Well, can you beat the women? Held for murder and worrying about her preserves.
I guess before we're through, she may have something more serious than preserves to worry about.
Well, women are used to worrying over trifles.
And yet, for all their worries, what will we do without the ladies? Dirty towels. Not much of a housekeeper, would you say, ladies?
Well, there's a great deal of work to be done on a farm.
To be sure. And yet, I know there are some Dixon County farmhouses which do not have such roller towels.
Well, those towels get dirty awful quick. Men's hands aren't always as clean as they might be.
Loyal to your sex, I see. But you and Mrs. Wright were neighbors. I suppose you were friends, too.
I've not seen much of her of late years. I've not been in this house. It's more than a year.
And why was that? You didn't like her?
Oh, I liked her all well enough. Farmers' wives have their hands full, Mr. Henderson, and then...
Yes.
It never seemed a very cheerful place.
No. It's not cheerful. I shouldn't say she had the homemaking instinct.
Well, I don't know as Wright did either.
You mean they didn't get on very well?
No, I don't mean anything. But I don't think a place would be any cheerfuler for John Wright's being in it.
I'd like to talk more of that a little later. I want to get the lay of things upstairs now.
I suppose anything Mrs. Peters does will be all right. She was to take in some clothes for her, you know, and with the little things, but we left in such a hurry yesterday.
Yes, but I would like to see what you take, Mrs. Peters, and keep an eye out for anything that may have been useful to us.
Yes, Mr. Henderson.
I'd hate to have men coming into my kitchen snooping around and criticizing.
Of course, it's no more than their duty.
Oh, duty's all right. But I guess that deputy sheriff that came out to make the fire just might have got a little dirt on the towel. Wish I thought of that sooner. It seems mean to talk about her for not having things slicked up when she had to come away in such a hurry. Oh, it is a shame about her fruit. I wonder if it's all gone. I think there's some here that's all right. Oh, yes, Mrs. Peters here. And this is cherries, too. I declare I believe it's the only one. Oh, she'll feel awful after all her hard work in the hot weather. I remember the afternoon I put up my cherries last summer.
Well, I must get those things from the front room closet. You coming with me, Mrs. Hale? You could help me carry them.
My, it's cold in there. Wright was close. I think maybe that's why she kept so much to herself. She didn't even belong to the ladies' aid. I suppose she felt she couldn't do her part, and then you don't really enjoy things when you feel shabby. She used to wear pretty clothes and be lively. When she was Minnie Foster, one of the town girls singing in the choir. Oh, that was 30 years ago. Is that all you was to take in?
She said she wanted an apron. Funny thing to want, for there isn't much to get you dirty in jail, goodness knows, but I suppose just to make her feel more natural. She said they was in the top drawer in the cupboard. Ah, yes. Here it is. And her little shawl. Yes, here it is.
Mrs. Peters.
Yes, Mrs. Hale?
Do you think she did it?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, I don't think she did. Asking for her apron and her little shawl. Worrying about her fruit.
Mr. Peters says it looks bad for her. Mr. Henderson's awful sarcastic in his speech. He'll make fun of her for saying she didn't wake up.
Well, I guess John Wright didn't wake up when they was slipping the rope around his neck.
Yeah, that's strange. It must have been done awful crafty and still. They say it was such a funny way to kill a man. Rigging it all up like that?
That's just what Mr. Hale said. Or there was a gun in the house. He says that's what he can't understand.
Mr. Henderson said coming out that what was needed for the case was a motive. Something to show anger or a sudden feeling.
Well, I don't see any signs of anger around here. Now, I wonder how they're finding things upstairs. I hope she had it a little more read up there. You know, it seems kind of sneaking, locking her up in town and then coming out here and trying to get her own house to turn against her.
But Mrs. Hale, the law is the law.
I suppose 'tis. Better loosen up your things, Mrs. Peters. You won't feel them when you go out.
Oh, she was piecing a quilt.
Oh, it's a log cabin pattern. Pretty, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if she was going to quilt it or just knot it.
I didn't wonder if she was going to quilt it or just knot it.
Frank's fire didn't do much up there, did it? Well, let's go out to the barn and get that cleared up.
Well, I don't know as there's anything so strange. Are taking up time with little things while they're out. We're waiting for them to get the evidence. I don't see it's anything to laugh about.
Of course, they've got awful important things on their minds.
Mrs. Peters, look at this one. Here, this is the one she was working on. And look at the sewing. All the rest have been nice and even, and look at this. It's all over the place. Why? It looks as if she didn't know what she was about.
What are you doing, Mrs. Hale?
I'm just pulling out a stitch or two that's not sewed very good. Bad sewing always makes me fidgety.
I don't think we ought to touch things.
Well, I'll just finish up this end. Mrs. Peters.
Yes, Mrs. Hale?
What do you suppose she was nervous about?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if she was nervous. I sometimes sew awful queer when I'm tired. Well, I must get these things wrapped up. They may be through sooner than we think. I wonder where I could find a piece of paper and some string.
Oh, in the cupboard, maybe.
Oh, why? Here's a bird cage. Did she have a bird, Mrs. Peters?
Well, I don't know whether she did or not. I've not been here for so long. There was a man around last year selling canaries cheap, but I don't know if she took one. Maybe she did. Well, she used to sing real pretty herself.
It seems funny to think of a bird here. She must have had one, else why else would she have a cage? Wonder what happened to it. Well, look at this door. It's broke. The hinge is pulled apart.
Looks as if someone must have been rough with it.
Yes.
Oh, I wish if they were going to find evidence, they'd be about it. I don't like this place.
But I'm awful glad you came with me, Mrs. Hale. Oh, it would be lonesome for me sitting here alone.
It would, wouldn't it? But I tell you what I do wish, Mrs. Peters. I wish I had come over sometimes when she was here. I wish I had.
But of course you were awful busy. You had your house and your children.
I could have come. I stayed away because it weren't cheerful. And that's why I ought to have come. I've never liked this place. Maybe because it's down in the hollow and you don't see the road. I don't know what it is, but it's a lonesome place. And always was. I wish I had come over to see Minnie Foster sometimes. I can see now.
Well, you mustn't reproach yourself, Mrs. Hale. Somehow we just don't see how it is with other folks until something comes up.
Not having children makes less work, but it makes a quiet house. And right out to work all day and no company when he did come in. Did you know John Wright, Mrs. Peters?
No, I didn't know him. I'd seen him in town. You say he was a good man?
Yes, good. He didn't drink, kept his word as well as most, I guess, and paid his debts. But he was a hard man, Mrs. Peters. Just to pass the time of day with him like a raw wind that gets to the bone. I should think she would have wanted a bird. But what do you suppose went with it?
I don't know. Unless it got sick and died.
You didn't know her? Well, come to think of it, she was kind of like a bird herself. Real sweet and pretty, but kind of timid and fluttery. Yeah. Well, tell you what, Mrs. Peters, why don't you take the quilt in with you? It might take up her mind.
Why, I think that is a real nice idea, Mrs. Hale. There couldn't possibly be any objection to it, could there? Oh, I wonder if her patches are in here. And her things.
Well, I expect this has got sewing things in it. Huh. What a pretty box. Looks like something somebody would give you. Maybe your scissors are in here. Oh, there's something wrapped up in this piece of silk.
Well, this isn't her scissors.
Oh, Mrs. Peters, it's
the bird.
Well, Mrs. Peters, look at it. Its neck, look at its neck.
Somebody wrung its neck.
Well, ladies, have you decided if she was going to quilt it or knot it?
We think she was going to knot it.
That's interesting, I'm sure. Has the bird flown?
We think the cat got it.
Is there a cat?
Well, not now. They're superstitious, you know? They leave.
No sign at all of anyone having come from the outside, their own rope. Now let's go upstairs again and go over it piece by piece. It would have to be someone who knew the home.
She liked the bird. She was going to bury it in that pretty box. No right wouldn't like a bird, a thing that sang. She used to sing. He killed that too.
We don't know who killed the bird.
I knew John Wright.
It was an awful thing that was done in this house that night, Mrs. Hale. Killing a man while he slept, slipping a rope around his neck that choked the life out of him.
His neck. The life choked out of him.
We don't know who killed him. We don't know.
If there had been years and years of nothing, and then a bird to sing to you, it would be awful. Still, after the bird was still.
I know what stillness is. My first baby died when he was just 2 years old. I know what stillness is. The law has got to punish crime. Mrs. Hale.
I wish you'd seen Minnie Foster when she wore a white dress with the blue ribbons and stood up there in the choir and sang. Oh, I wish I'd come over here once in a while. That was a crime. That was a crime. Who's gonna punish that?
We mustn't take on.
I might have known she needed help. Oh, I know how things can be with women. I tell you, Mrs. Peters, we live close together and we live far apart. We all go through the same things. And it's all just a different kind of the same thing. If I was you, I wouldn't tell her her fruit was gone. Tell her it ain't. Tell her it's all right.
Oh, it's a good thing the men couldn't hear us when they just laugh. Getting all stirred up over a little thing like a dead canary. As if that could have anything to do with when they laugh.
Well, maybe they would. Maybe they wouldn't.
Peters, it's all perfectly clear except for a reason for doing it. You know juries when it comes to women. If there were some definite thing, something to show, something to make a story about, a thing that would connect up with this strange way of doing it.
Well, I got the team around. Pretty cold out there.
I'm gonna stay here by myself for a while. You can send Frank out for me, can't you? I want to go over everything. I'm not convinced we can't do better.
Do you want to see what Mrs. Peters is going to take in?
Oh, I guess they're not very dangerous things the ladies have picked out. No, Mrs. Peters doesn't need my supervision. For that matter, a sheriff's wife is married to the law. Ever think of it that way, Mrs. Peters?
Not just that way.
Married to the law. I just want you to come in here a minute, George. We ought to take a look at these windows.
Windows.
We'll be right out, Mr. Hale.
Well, Henry, at least we found out that she was not going to quilt it. She was going to, what is it you call it, ladies?
We call it not it, Mr. Henderson.
Mm-hmm.